In my prior video, part 1, I explained how my husband Ryan entered the hospital on November 21st, 2021, 11 days after initial symptoms, and was given heavy sedatives and an antiviral drug called remdesivir that the World Health Organization was at the time warning not to use, and it was given secretly against our consent. Because I was unable to go in with my husband and he was kept alone without an advocate, our only way to communicate was via phone or text message. Ryan was communicating with his Aunt Robin, who is a nurse and works for a local VA hospital here in Michigan. Ryan was telling her the nurses said his lungs sounded relatively good and he was making improvements. The nurses were also talking about putting him in a step-down unit because of his improvements. When talking to me, he was again mentioning feeling delusional, which he called ER psychosis, a term he got from his Aunt Robin, who told him it's normal. What none of us knew at the time was that this was being caused by the heavy sedation and anti-anxiety drugs Ryan was being given. Can you imagine making critical decisions while feeling this way because you are not allowed a patient advocate? Ryan talks to his Uncle Kenny, who was also just sent home with oxygen to recover from his COVID diagnosis. Kenny was not given remdesivir, even though his oxygen levels were much worse, versus Ryan's oxygen staying in the normal range. A difference in care that would be the difference between life and death. Ryan informed his uncle that he was off oxygen completely and wearing 2 face masks. Ryan was up and moving, trying to fight the existing pneumonia. Ryan told his uncle that they gave him a Valium to help him prepare for proning, which is where a patient is told to lay on their stomach for an extended period of time. It's uncomfortable on the patient, but thought to help take pressure off the lungs. Ryan was talking to his friend's son, named Christian, and telling him how he was feeling loopy and out of it. Ryan has never taken anxiety medications. Ryan was never a high anxiety type guy. He is a very calm, go-with-the-flow type of person who handles pressure well. Ryan continues to tell his aunt that he is improving and closer to coming home. She asked him if they had him on remdesivir. By this time, we had learned that the hospital gave it on day 1 he came in, despite us both telling them we do not consent to it. His kidneys were already showing some warning signs of distress, but we didn't know how bad it was going to be. His aunt didn't warn him about that drug at any point. Ryan tells her they have him on some new experimental pill. Remember this, for in a later episode, we will talk about how the doctors told me they don't allow any off-label, non-FDA approved medications that are not designed to treat that exact issue. Trying something new and experimental like ivermectin would be called unethical. It seemed every time Ryan was doing well and improving, the hospital kept giving him more and more sedatives. Those will certainly slow down his breathing. It appears that was the obvious plan. After being given sedatives such as anti-anxiety medications, Ryan's oxygen would become faster and labored, to which more sedatives would be given. When talking to his friend Brian, Ryan tells him he is on antiviral drugs, yet Ryan would not be in a viral phase. Antiviral drugs only work in the earliest of symptoms. At this point, his lungs would be dealing with inflammation. He told his friend Brian that he would not be consenting to a ventilator. Like so many, Ryan was being told he has COPD, and he just didn't know it. However, Ryan did not have COPD. Ryan was also texting his Uncle Kenny about being given more sedatives to be able to breathe. Ryan talks to his friend Christian, who was happy to read the update that Ryan's oxygen was doing good still, and he was still fighting and on the road to coming home soon. However, I got a call this day around 2 a.m. from a doctor who told me that I needed to convince my husband to go on a ventilator to, in his own words, give his body rest. When I told him that's insane and doesn't make sense because my husband's oxygen is not bad and actually averaging normal, he sounded confused and said he would have to check with that and get back with me. My gosh, has he even evaluated my husband, or is he simply doing what comes next? I text my husband to warn him about the doctor, scared that they would lie and tell him that I thought that was a good idea. I told my husband to again ask to try ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine.
Tell me the characteristics of a perfect drug to treat COVID. What would you ask for? So I think you would ask for something, firstly, that's safe, that's cheap, that's readily available, and that has antiviral and anti-inflammatory properties. People would say, that's ridiculous. There could not possibly be a drug that has all of those characteristics. That's just unreasonable. But we do. The drug is called ivermectin.
Ryan told me not to listen to the ones pushing the vent, that it would only stress us both out. He told me his oxygen was at 95. He told me I must have heard the doctor wrong, saying there is no way I need to be on a vent. My O2 is fine. Ryan was telling his uncle they had been forcing air into his lungs, so they had him on a high-flow oxygen mask, where they began to over-oxygenate the lungs. Kenny told Ryan about the 2 a.m. call I got from the doctor about putting Ryan on a vent. Ryan assured Uncle Kenny that that would not be happening. Ryan was convinced I must have heard the doctor wrong. Ryan said there was one idiot nurse who pushed for a vent, but that he told her, no way in hell, never bring it up again. Ryan assured his aunt as well that his oxygen was staying in the mid-90s. She asked him what his decision would be if asked to go on a ventilator. Ryan told her that it won't be necessary. While she told him she would fight anyone who would go against his decision, we never heard one word from dear Aunt Robin as a voice for Ryan when his rights would be minutes away from being violated. Ryan was unknowingly at this time being given sedatives, and they would be lowering his oxygen to prepare him for a ventilator.
Midazolam is a benzodiazepine, and it's specifically designed originally for status epilepticus. So to prevent somebody who is having while somebody is having a large epileptic seizure, it's to calm their body down and to stop all the involuntary movements.
Midazolam was a later development of the benzodiazepines. Basically, it is a potent drug with a quick onset. So it found a place for conscious sedation, which is a short intravenous injection, and it will sedate somebody very effectively for a procedure for a short period of time, and then it'll wear off quickly. So it was just what's needed. The only thing was that if you used it for that, it would have to be accompanied by a pain medication, because it doesn't itself remove pain. So it will always be the benzodiazepine plus an opiate to remove the pain.
There was a gentleman killed in 2014 with 10 milligrams of midazolam. And the worst thing is, I've also found out NHS paperwork that shows you that the protocol now during the pandemic is that they're giving breathless patients up to 30 milligrams of morphine and 60 milligrams of midazolam, which is enough to kill anybody.
The other thing is, if you go to the British National Formulary online, and it's quite easy to look up, you look up the page midazolam, you will see that it's contraindicated to give midazolam with opiates, and that is standard practice in these end-of-life pathways. It should not be given. It's not medicine. There is no reason to be giving these medications. Midazolam should be banned from these pathways.
The same doctor called me back again, and this time he was not happy. He again told me I need to convince my husband to go on a ventilator. I told him I won't do that. Why in the world would I do that when my husband's oxygen is in the 90s? That's when he said this.
Ma'am, to be honest with you, we told your husband we are going to vent him, with or without his consent.
All I got out was, that's illegal, and he slammed the phone down on me. Unknown to us both, Ryan had sent me what would be his last text. Ryan told me his oxygen was in the 90s. He had no clue who the doctor was that I spoke to about putting him on a vent. But again, he told them no. He said a nurse spoke with his mom and told her that Ryan is doing better today. Ryan sent me one final photo of his oxygen at 97%. Then all communication stopped with my husband. All communication stopped with him and everyone. The same doctor calls me back and says,
I'm just calling to let you know, we vented your husband around 2 hours ago.
What was the reasoning for venting him?
His oxygen was at 40%. He was turning blue, and he told us to just do it.
I looked at his screenshot again and knew he was lying to me, but the damage was done. My thoughts, let him document that lie, and I'll have evidence to show otherwise. Now I need to lawyer up and defend my husband. However, when we got his medical records much later, it was revealed that they documented venting Ryan while he had a normal 98% oxygen level. So what he told me on the phone was said just to tell me what he thought I needed to hear, to accept the fact my husband's rights were null and voided, just as they have been from day one.
They were intubating patients when they were needing as little as 3 liters of oxygen. Now, 3 liters of oxygen with a nasal cannula is so minimal. Never in the history of my 25 years of being a respiratory therapist, you would never consider intubating somebody because they're on that negligible amount of oxygen. That's so little oxygen to the point where if you took the patient off of it, they're going to be fine. But there was this rush to intubate these patients. And just so the viewers know, and I think this is kind of why Ken had me in the book, is to kind of help folks understand what it means to be intubated, what it means to be placed on a ventilator. So when you're put on a ventilator, first they have to put the endotracheal tube down into your throat, into your trachea. We call it a garden hose in my field. I mean, it is a big tube. It's very uncomfortable. You need to be, in order to place this, in most cases, especially with COVID, the patient needs to be paralyzed and then sedated, knock out their respiratory drive. So all of these medications they're giving, there's this cascade of negative effects. I mean, hemodynamically unstable, so you're going to need blood pressure medications. And worse is you're introducing probably the most invasive infection risk you could possibly have in medical care, putting this tube down into somebody's lungs. You're going to give them a bacterial pneumonia. Almost everybody after a few days is going to end up with a bacterial pneumonia on top of, this virus that they're dealing with. So it is extremely dangerous. And I tried to convince doctors that this wasn't the right thing to do. In fact, when I started my career in 1999, I went to the university hospital. I went to a huge symposium talking about the risks of intubation, the risks of using a ventilator. And even back then, it was known that intubation should be a last resort. At that time, they were reporting a 25% increase in mortality of patients that were getting intubated and put on a ventilator. And now we know during COVID, it was upwards of 85% of people that were on ventilators passed away. So the early intubation side of this was insane. We know that hospitals were getting paid a massive bonus. I believe it was $39,000 to have an intubated patient, and then the whole remdesivir thing is another story. So
I was now on a mission on my own to find doctors willing to fight for Ryan's life and listen to our request. We don't want to be on this protocol. Why are they forcing this? And who can help my husband try something else? Who will listen to us? Please, God, help me defend my husband. Follow my page starting with part 1 as I begin to take you on my journey from the last 3 years. And by the end, you can decide, was this hospital guilty of negligence or solicitation to commit murder?